Hi, Toni.
Hello, Lindsay. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. So for this interview, which will go to both Chronic Wellness and Full Circle Wellness Tools, I am so excited to introduce my audiences to Toni Bernhard, who is absolutely, I think, the most transformational writer out there about not only chronic illness, but coming into your own wellness. Toni is the author of two of my very favorite books. The first, How to Be Sick, and the second, How to Wake Up. And I just cannot thank you enough for joining me today, Toni.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for those kind words. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I just want to give a tiny bit of background about how I first received your book, and then I'd love to hear a little bit about your story and how you came to start on your writing career and your health journey in general. But I do have to tell you that your book came to me. It was one of those blessing signpost moments when I was at a particularly dark part in my journey, and a good friend and Lyme disease coach, Marla Lipshin, said, Lindsay, there's this book that I really feel like you need to read. And from the first moment that I held it in my hands, first I had a lot of grief moved. It felt so huge for me to find resonance in someone's experience that felt like you not only had been there, but you were so gentle and kind with yourself and with your readers about how hard it is, and so authentic and transparent about how you navigate the ups and downs of living with not feeling good in your body, and how to be comfortable in life and in your life when it's not so comfortable to be in your body. So it was hugely transformational for me. I recommend this book for all of my clients. I recommend it as often as I can. I follow your work. You are a prolific writer and contribute to Psychology Today. So I know that when people are done listening to this interview, that they will find a wealth of information and a lot of transformational words out there that you have contributed. And I want to thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
So I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to writing How to Be Sick.
Well, we have to go backwards almost 13 years. 2001.
Okay.
I was healthy in my body and had plans to continue with my career for another 20 years. I was a teacher at the law school on campus here. I live in Davis at University of California, Davis.
Yeah.
And my husband and I took a trip to Paris, which was a big deal for us because we're not really travelers. And I got sick there with what we just thought was an acute viral infection. But I never recovered. And so it turned from an acute illness into a chronic illness. And basically, I feel as if I call it the flu without the fever. And if people think about what it's like when you have the flu, you just have such limited energy stores. And you might be able to get up for an hour or two, but then you have to lie down. And there's a lot of napping and very difficult. And I couldn't continue with my career. It was just a total shock because, we think when you get sick, you get better. And I simply was not able to continue. I tried to go back part-time and it was a disaster. And so I suddenly found myself in my bedroom alone, a lot of the time, alone with my laptop and my dog because my husband was working. And I, for several years, was in a state of really kind of shock and despair at times. Yeah. And at the time that I got sick, I'd been a practicing Buddhist for 10 years. But I really put that aside because I just was fighting against what was happening to me so strongly. But after about 3 or 4 years of fighting against what was happening. It's as if I let the Buddha's teachings back into my life and thought, I'm suffering physically. And by trying to fight what's happening all the time, I'm just adding mental suffering to the suffering of the illness. And through that realization, I began to turn my attitude about what was happening around. And I said, okay, I'm going to start where I am each day. I may feel sick. I may be in pain. That's my starting point. And of course, I'll work on getting better. I'm always looking for new treatments. But I'm also going to try to find some joy and a measure of peace with my life as it is. And so I began to write about that.
Yeah.
And that became How to Be Sick.
Amazing. So is it granting yourself permission to be right where you were?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Instead of being in a state of constant denial and anger and resentment and this feeling that the world had done an injustice to me.
Right.
Well, things happen.
Right.
Things happen to everybody that we don't control. And so it doesn't mean we're not always trying to improve our quality of life and our physical state if we're ill, and our even our mental state. We're always trying to improve things, but the ability to say, okay, this is what my life is this very day.
Right.
Let me look around and see what it has to offer. It was like a huge burden was lifted off of my shoulders when I was able to do that.
That's huge. And is that when you began writing? How did that writing piece enter in for you?
Well, I actually, when this shift in my attitude began, I thought, whoa, I'm learning how to be sick. Right. And I know that can be taken the wrong way to mean a kind of passivity, but it's not at all. It's, as I said, it's this idea of accepting where you are.
Yeah.
Instead of always fighting the moment. And this is true for people. My husband likes to say that actually sickness, illness, it's a metaphor for life. Because everybody, whether they're sick or whether they're well, everybody's facing difficulties and stresses and challenges. Everybody's facing, everyone wishes certain things about their life was different, sure. Maybe a different job, kids behaving differently, a different relationship. And so whether you're sick in body, whether you're well in body, all of us can fall into this trap of spending our lives wishing that things were otherwise. And all that does is make our difficulties worse, rather than saying, okay, this is how things are. Yep. I'm sick, or I'm unhappy with my work. This is how things are. Life is sometimes easy, sometimes tough. Right now it's tough. I'm going to treat myself with compassion over the difficulties and start where I am to make the best of it.
Absolutely.
And so I began to write, really for myself, different ideas. Lots of, as you know, my books are full of practices. Yes. Because I think theories don't take us very far. But I have compassion practices and loving kindness practices. And I began to write about those in the first book in terms of illness, and in my new book, How to Wake Up, just in terms of all of life's difficulties, how we can work with various practices, equanimity, as I said, compassion, to find a measure of peace in the life that we have.
I love that so much. One of the things I carry with me daily from your books is that you aren't making false promises, that you're not offering to wave a magic wand or to, invite miracles into our life. What you're really saying is, although all of those things can come, they can come through subtle things like our shifts in our mindset, like you're describing, but also that they may not, and that's okay. And
Yeah.
and that being granted that permission was so unique and so refreshing and so honest, that I was able to surrender into being sick in a way I hadn't before, and just reclaiming the energy from not struggling against being sick puts you in a better place.
That's so beautifully expressed, Lindsay, because you're right. I have precious little energy, and if I use it up fighting against what I can't change, then that's how I've spent my life, fighting. It's like hitting your head against the wall. And I think the reason that my perspective is unique is that we live in this culture where there's a lot of messages, cultural messages we get and from other people that, if you just think, all your dreams can come true.
Right.
And if you just have a positive attitude, anything you want, you can get. Well, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but life is not that way. Yeah. We control a lot less than we wish we did in our lives. There's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unpredictability. And what I've found is the road to peace and well-being for me is to accept that and learn to roll with the punches in a way, and keep a balanced state of mind that I call it in How to Wake Up our wisdom mind.
Right.
This wisdom of knowing that life is a mix of joys and sorrows and successes and disappointments and pleasant experiences and unpleasant experiences. There isn't anybody on the planet, and there isn't anyone all through history whose life hasn't been that mix. And when we deny it, we're denying a large part of what the human experience is, and it keeps us from being at peace.
Absolutely. I remember before I got to your book, How to Be Sick, someone said to me, every day is a good day. And that was such an affront to me at that point because I was in so much pain and I was so afraid and I was feeling so disconnected from not only the people that I love, but myself, because I was a new version of me that I didn't know and didn't understand. And it wasn't until I had really opened and digested your words that I finally could see what that person meant. And it's exactly what you're saying, that we don't have control of these externals and we don't necessarily get to decide whether we're going to have pain in our hands and feet that day.
Right.
But we do have the ability to work on what suffering we cause on our own behalf and how we frame what we're doing. And so I felt like your books were the key to unlocking that mystery that sounded like this Pollyanna thing, every day is a good day. And now I actually have found that peace where the sun rises and regardless of how I feel in my body, I can honestly give true gratitude and thanks because I have another day in which to do that work.
Yeah, I mean, those words, every day is a good day, can be taken, I think this is what you're saying, it can be taken one of two ways.
Yeah.
To the extent that the person is saying, you're going to feel fabulous every day.
Right.
To me, that's not the way my life is.
Right.
But the other way you can take every day is a good day is every day is what it is.
Yes.
And if we can learn to accept that with grace, even the days when we're not feeling so good, we can find some goodness in every day. I do believe that. But it's, as you said, it's not a Pollyanna type of goodness.
Right. Absolutely. So I'm really curious about the journey you've been on between writing How to Be Sick to where you wrote How to Wake Up. And I've heard a little bit, and I follow your writing, so I've heard little bits through that too, about how as people reached out to you, you began to realize that the message was so universal, that as we dive into these issues of, regardless of what you're facing, the thing you have control over is your presence process or your mindfulness. I would love to hear a little bit about how that evolution happened for you.
Well, after I wrote How to Be Sick, I didn't have plans to write another book because I thought I had said everything I had to say to other people. But I began to get, these days, correspondence, of course, means emails, because my website has an email contact on it. I began to get emails and a lot of private Facebook messages from people who had read How to Be Sick, and then they would ask me about life's difficulties not connected to illness.
Sure.
Relationship troubles and troubles on the job and worries about money and worries about taking care of aging parents. And so that led me to broaden my focus.
Sure.
And it also led me back to looking at the Buddha's core teachings on why it is that we make things so difficult, why we're dissatisfied so much of the time with our lives, and what it is we do that causes that. And I discovered how grounded in everyday life his teachings were, and how it's quite simple, although not simple to bring into our lives. But it's really, to some extent, what I've already said, which is that our life is the way it is at the moment.
Right.
And when the cause of dissatisfaction and suffering, as it's known in Buddhism, this is the first noble truth, that life will be difficult and at times, that we make things worse when we are caught up in this constant desire to control what happens in our lives and to make things exactly the way we want them to be, because we simply can't always do that.
Right.
And my understanding of the Buddha's awakening, which is why I called the second book How to Wake Up, is that this was not a supernatural event on his part. He sat down under a tree and meditated and started to observe his experience. And what he saw was just what I've talked about, how we make things more difficult for ourselves when we fight against the way things are in our life. And that peace and well-being is something available to all of us at any moment, because the Buddha was just a human being. He was not a god. He was just a human being. And he woke up to what it means to be human and how we can navigate life in a way that brings us peace. And in addition to not always following our desires, being driven by desires that we can't fulfill, he also taught many practices, positive practices for us to cultivate, like self-compassion and kindness towards others and equanimity. And when we work with these practices, this creates this sense of well-being in our lives, no matter what our particular circumstances are. And so it was out of that, really returning to his teachings, driven by all these emails I was getting, that I wrote the second book, which is broader in scope than the first one, but very similar in writing style. I write in a personal way and with lots and lots of practices. But does that answer what you were asking?
It absolutely does. Okay. And honestly, if I could give a gift to every human being on this planet who, whether they're dealing with, chronic illness or chronic overwhelm, but they're seeking to find more peace in their body and in their lives, I would give them the gift of your two books. And I do hope that anyone watching and listening, as you come across this, please gift yourself these amazing words and this gift that Toni has created for all of us. I also want to encourage people to find you on Facebook. It's another place of daily inspiration and the good word. And I actually have a question, because we have something in common, which is, I believe, a love for birds. And
yes.
I so much enjoy your photos of birds, and I feel that they're actually very connected to Buddhism and to teachings. And I just wanted to hear what your connection to birds was.
Well, my connection to birds is kind of twofold. I had a very dear friend who was, she died some years ago, but she was an avid bird watcher. Uh-huh. She would go on these trips, and she taught me how to identify, if you see a bird in the outside, how to identify it. Remember certain distinguishing marks and bring it to your bird book and identify it. So I first got my love for bird watching from my friend Mickey, wonderful, who bought me some bird books. But then when I got sick, I pretty much, I'm in my bedroom most of the day, and I have two windows to my backyard, and I'm very lucky that they go down to the floor. They're like floor to ceiling windows. And I get to watch birds. I don't have this great variety, but I read somewhere that birds are the wildlife that we can get the closest to.
Yeah.
And that's true. And so I can have a bird like 2 yards from me. Yeah. And so I love them because they're the wild creatures in my life. So I do love to put up pictures of birds on Facebook. If people find me on Facebook, Toni Bernhard, they're going to see that I'm at my friend's limit. But if you click follow,
yes,
I think you get all the same. You get all my postings, and I don't think there's much difference.
Yes.
So you just have to click follow.
No, I encourage everyone to do so. I'm so incredibly thankful for our time talking today. At the end of these interviews, I love to ask, if I call it the one thing, if there were just one thing, one teaching or one practice, or even just one subtle shift that you might recommend for a person who is really needing a shift in their lives, what would that one thing be?
Well, that one thing would be to treat yourself kindly. Mm-hmm. And actually, that comes from the Buddha. He said, there is no one more deserving of your loving kindness than you. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's true. We control so little in this life. The one thing we can control is how we treat ourselves. And I don't see any reason ever not to treat yourself gently and kindly and with compassion for your suffering. So that's what I hope for everybody listening today, that you treat yourself kindly.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lindsay. This has really been nice for me.
Oh, me too. It's been such an honor and a pleasure, and I'm so excited for the audience. If they are new to finding you, please do go find Toni Bernhard on Facebook or find her books, How to Be Sick and How to Wake Up, and find them today and share them. They are life changing. Well, thank you again for your time. I do hope we can stay in touch. As I said, I'm a huge fan, and I just appreciate being on the journey with you.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye bye.
Bye.